the man who never became an adult. Psychological truth: you've met him before. Maybe he's someone you know, or maybe he lives inside you. He pays his bills. He goes to work. He might even have a family. But beneath the surface, behind the routines and the titles, there's a haunting truth. He never truly became an adult. Not in the way that matters. Not in the way that life demands when it's time to face the full weight of existence. He's the man who never became an adult, and the world is full of him. The tragedy is that no one notices, not even himself. We often think adulthood begins with responsibility. When you pay rent, clock in early, or memorize your insurance provider's phone number, you're considered an adult. But what if that's a lie society tells us to create structure in the chaos? What if growing up is not about age or duty but about depth? About the moment you stop running from the echoes of your childhood fears and finally look them in the eye. And what if most people, especially men, never reach that point? What if they just build taller walls around their pain and call it maturity? Let me ask you something difficult. When did you become an adult? Was it the first time you got a job? Or the first time you felt hopeless? Was it the moment you moved out of your parents' house? Or the moment you realized no one was coming to save you? We all want adulthood to be a clean transition, a doorway you walk through and never look back. But the truth is, many of us bring our inner child with us, wounded, confused, and still waiting for love that never came. And that child doesn't disappear. He just hides behind adult behaviors: stoicism, avoidance, humor, rage, achievement. This is the man who never became an adult. Not because he didn't want to, but because no one ever showed him how. When he was young, he was probably told to be a man before he even knew what that meant. He learned early that crying was weakness, that vulnerability was shameful, and that emotions were dangerous. So he locked them away deep inside. And as the years passed, he built an identity on top of that silence. He became competent, maybe even successful. But internally, he remained frozen at the emotional age he was when he first learned that to be loved, he had to hide. We don't talk about this enough. There are entire generations of men who grew up thinking adulthood meant suppressing their inner world. And what happens when you suppress something for too long? It doesn't vanish, it festers. It leaks into relationships as emotional unavailability. It shows up in arguments as defensiveness or coldness. It appears in fatherhood as distance, in marriage as stonewalling, in solitude as addiction. And yet, these men rarely realize what's happening. They just feel that something is missing. They walk around with a quiet hunger for meaning, connection, or peace, but can't quite name what they've lost. Because what they lost was themselves. You can't become an adult if you've never fully met yourself. If you've never sat with your brokenness without trying to fix it immediately. If you've never faced your childhood anger without blaming your parents or the world. If you've never allowed your pain to speak without silencing it with productivity. Becoming an adult is not about outgrowing your past, it's about integrating it. And most people skip that part because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to build a life than to build a self.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's a question that might sting. Are you emotionally the same age you were when you first felt deeply unloved? Did that moment freeze a part of you in time? And if so, who have you been pretending to be ever since? This is why the man who never became an adult is everywhere. He's in boardrooms, on dating apps, in church pews, on Instagram. He's the one who gives advice but never takes it, who jokes about dark things because it's safer than feeling them, who keeps achieving without ever feeling fulfilled, who stays busy because silence is terrifying, who lashes out when intimacy gets too close. He doesn't know he's stuck, but he is. And the world rewards his stuckness. It calls him strong. It calls him stable. It calls him a provider. But deep down, he's still waiting for someone to come and tell him it's okay to feel, to cry, to not have it all together, to be human instead of a role. And maybe that someone is you. Because here's the truth that breaks the illusion. Time doesn't heal emotional wounds, consciousness does. You can be 45 and still be emotionally 12. You can be a grandfather and still be terrified of abandonment. You can be a leader and still be terrified of being seen. So the question isn't how old are you? The real question is, how long have you been hiding? The mask of masculinity, how culture trains men to stay emotionally frozen from the moment a boy takes his first steps into the world. Society begins stitching a mask for him. It's subtle at first, phrases from adults, media tropes, playground politics, but over time, the stitching becomes tighter and more suffocating. The mask is called masculinity, but not in its purest or most sacred form. This is the manufactured version, the one built not on strength, wisdom, or inner peace, but on suppression, silence, and performance. We tell boys to be strong, but we confuse strength with numbness. We tell them to be leaders, but we confuse leadership with dominance. We tell them to be men, but we never teach them what that actually means, only what it must not look like. Soft, emotional, uncertain, vulnerable. This is how the man who never became an adult is born. Not through failure, but through conditioning. He wears the mask so well that even he believes it's his face. He believes that anger is safer than sadness, that control is more respectable than confusion, that power is more attractive than peace. Every time he fell down and heard man up, a part of him learned that pain should be buried. Every time he cried and someone told him to stop acting like a girl, he understood that his emotions were a threat to his identity. And every time he expressed fear and was met with mockery or indifference, he decided it was safer to stop feeling altogether. But the human soul is not designed for armor. And when you armor yourself for too long, your humanity begins to decay beneath the surface. That's what we're seeing all around us adults who are emotionally starved, relationally brittle, and spiritually fragmented. Not because they are broken, but because they've been trained to be incomplete. And it's not just men who reinforce the mask. Women do it too. Society does it collectively. We all contribute to the myth that masculinity must look a certain way: stoic, unfeeling, invulnerable. We applaud men who suffer in silence, who sacrifice without complaint, who bury their needs for the sake of productivity. But then we wonder why so many of them feel empty, explode in rage, or withdraw when intimacy knocks on the door. Here's the paradox. The very traits we teach men to suppress are the ones most essential for adult psychological growth. Self-awareness, emotional literacy, the ability to name and navigate fear, the willingness to be wrong, the courage to be seen, not just admired or respected, but truly seen. These are the thresholds of adulthood, and yet the mask prevents men from ever approaching them. Because to take off the mask feels like death, like weakness, like betrayal of everything they were taught to value. But is it really betrayal or liberation? Let's ask something we rarely ask of men. What do you feel when you're alone and the performance stops? When there's no one to impress, no one to impress, no one to lead, no one to protect. Do you feel peace or do you feel panic? Do you know who you are without your roles and responsibilities? Or do you only know how to serve others' expectations? These are not just personal questions. They are cultural ones. Because when a man is trained to be emotionally frozen, it doesn't just affect him, it affects everyone who loves him. His partner feels the distance. His children feel the absence. His friends feel the wall. He may be physically present, but emotionally, he's unreachable. And still, the mask stays on until something breaks. A divorce, a breakdown, a betrayal, a loss. And suddenly, all the emotions that were buried come flooding in. Not because they're new, but because they've been patiently waiting for permission, waiting for space, waiting for the man to realize that adulthood is not about doing more, it's about feeling more, owning more, integrating more. It's about becoming whole again. The path to real masculinity does not lie in denying emotion, it lies in mastering it, in embracing it as a source of truth, not shame, in understanding that vulnerability is not the opposite of power, it is the foundation of it. And until we allow men to take off the mask without fear of rejection or ridicule, we will continue to raise generations of boys who grow old, but never grow up. So here's the question: what would the world look like if men were allowed and encouraged to be fully human? Not just protectors, providers, or performers, but feelers, healers, and truth-tellers. Emotional time travel. How unhealed childhood shapes your adult reality. Most of us believe we live in the present. We wake up, go to work, respond to texts, pay bills, and plan for the future. But emotionally, many of us are stuck in the past. We are children wearing adult costumes, reacting to life not as it is, but as it once was. And until we realize this, until we understand how deeply our childhood scripts control our adult behaviors, we will keep reliving the same emotional patterns, stuck in cycles we can't explain, haunted by feelings that seem to come from nowhere. But they do come from somewhere. They come from moments you barely remember but never really left. This is emotional time travel. It happens quietly, subtly. Sometimes, all it takes is a raised voice, a tone of disappointment, or a moment of rejection to send you straight back to being 6 years old again, unseen, unheard, unworthy. Suddenly, you're not responding to the situation in front of you, you're reacting to a wound from decades ago. And because you've never fully met that younger version of yourself, you don't even realize what's happening. You just feel the familiar sting of shame, the tightening in your chest, the urge to shut down or lash out. And then you wonder, why did I overreact? Why does this hurt so much? It hurts because it's not about now. It's about then. The man who never became an adult lives in this emotional time warp. He built his adult life on top of unexamined childhood pain, hoping that success, relationships, or control would silence the echoes. But he never went back to heal, to listen, to grieve. So the echoes became louder. They shaped his beliefs. I'm only valuable when I perform. If I show weakness, I'll be abandoned. No one will love me if they see the real me. These beliefs didn't come from logic, they came from survival. They were the emotional strategies of a child trying to make sense of a world that didn't always feel safe. But here's the truth. Unhealed children make wounded adults. And wounded adults create complex problems, not because they're bad people, but because they're carrying pain they never had the tools to process. That pain becomes armor. It becomes patterns. It becomes the invisible lens through which we see every interaction. And until we take the terrifying but liberating step of returning to those emotional origins, we stay trapped in stories that no longer serve us. So how do we break free? We begin by asking a question almost no one asks. What age is your pain? Seriously, how old were you when you learned that love wasn't guaranteed? When you discovered that your needs were too much or your emotions were too inconvenient? That's the age where part of you emotionally stopped growing. That's the age you return to every time something touches that original bruise. And if you don't heal that part of you, it will keep running the show. It will sabotage intimacy. It will fear success. It will avoid vulnerability. It will act out, shut down, or pretend everything's fine when it isn't. This is why adult healing requires inner dialogue. You have to go back and meet the child you were. You have to sit with him, not to scold or fix him, but to listen, to say, I see you, I hear you. You were never too much. You were simply never given enough. This isn't some abstract psychological exercise. It's real work. It's how we rewire the nervous system, rewrite the story, and reclaim the present. Because when you finally comfort the child within, the adult no longer needs to react from that place of lack. Imagine what might change in your life if you are no longer reacting from old pain. Imagine being able to meet conflict without shutting down, receive love without suspicion, express needs without guilt. That's what adulthood really is, not just aging, but integration. And integration means you carry all the parts of yourself with dignity, not shame. The child, the teen, the wounded, the wise, all of them belong. So let me ask you a question that could change everything. What if the real you isn't broken, just buried under years of misunderstood emotions? When we stop time traveling back into pain, we finally arrive in the present. And for many, that's the first time they've truly lived. The adult reborn, creating a self that was never given to you. There comes a moment in every healing journey that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. You've spent years climbing through pain, through confusion, through emotional time travel. You've peeled back the layers, confronted the child within, and taken off the mask you were told to wear. And now you're left with a terrifying realization. There is no script for who you're supposed to become next. No one ever handed you a blueprint for adulthood that wasn't shaped by fear, performance, or survival. So you face a question most people avoid their entire lives. Who am I, really, when I'm not performing, protecting, or pretending? This is the birth of the adult self, not the one you grew into passively, but the one you create consciously. It's the self that emerges not from reaction, but from reflection. Not from culture's expectations, but from your own truth. And it's terrifying because it's unfamiliar. It's like being handed a blank canvas when all you've ever known is tracing other people's outlines. But it's also the most liberating moment of your life, because for the first time you get to choose. You choose your values, not the ones you inherited or were guilted into, but the ones that feel aligned with your core. You choose your boundaries not as walls to keep others out, but as sacred lines that protect your peace. You choose your relationships not based on obligation or emptiness, but on mutual nourishment and truth. And most importantly, you choose how you show up for yourself. Not as a critic, not as a fixer, but as a compassionate witness to your own becoming. It's important to understand that this kind of adulthood isn't loud. It doesn't always come with applause. It's not about proving anything. It's about integrity, doing the inner work no one sees so you can live in a way that aligns with what you now know to be true. And that truth is personal. It's yours. No therapist, book, or mentor can define it for you. The best they can do is guide you toward your own voice, the one that's been whispering beneath the noise your entire life. But here's the paradox. Once you begin creating the self that was never given to you, you will start grieving. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're doing it right. You will mourn the years you wore a mask, the relationships that were built on your silence, the opportunities you missed while you were still stuck in emotional time travel. And most of all, you will mourn the version of you that had to survive instead of live. This grief is sacred. It means you're finally facing life on life's terms, not through the lens of your past, but with the courage to stand in your present. And from that place, you begin to rebuild, slowly, intentionally, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more you than you've ever been. You speak more truthfully. You listen more deeply. You hold yourself with the same kindness you once begged others to give. And piece by piece, you become the adult you always needed, the adult your younger self never met, the adult the world never taught you how to be. So what does it mean to truly become an adult? It means you stop living from your wounds and start living from your wisdom. It means you stop waiting for permission and start giving yourself authority. It means you stop outsourcing your sense of self and start creating it from the inside out. And yes, it's hard. It's lonely at times. It requires breaking down everything you thought you had to be. But what waits on the other side is worth it. Freedom, clarity, peace, and the quiet power of knowing who you are. So let me leave you with one final question, one that only you can answer. If no one had ever told you who you were supposed to be, who would you choose to become now? Because the man who never became an adult isn't your final story. The man who chose to be reborn, that's the one worth remembering.